Well, hello there. I'm Wayne Hoffman. I'm the president of Idaho Freedom Foundation, and I'm here with Tommy Ahlquist, who's a candidate for governor. And we're committing during this election cycle to interview all the candidates for governor, ask them your key questions, learn more about where they are in policies, and see how their policies stack up with your thoughts so you can cast an informed ballot in the May election. So, Tommy, welcome. Glad to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to jump right into this.
Okay.
We'll just get right to this. A lot of people were surprised that you announced about a year ago that you're running. And one of the first things you mentioned to me is that you've been a lifelong Republican. You said a lot of folks don't believe you. And I wanted to kind of drill down into that a little bit. And tell me why you showing up here all of a sudden out of the blue, people should believe that you're a lifelong Republican.
I like telling, my family sure believes me. That I was at a family reunion this summer and they said, we're following you along online and people are saying you're a Democrat. They think it's the funniest thing ever. I don't know. I think when you're not in the system, if you're a politician, if you're a career politician, there is a certain thing you do because it's part of your life. It's part of what you do. It's part of your pathway in life. And I think that that's very familiar to career politicians. And most of you hang around career politicians a lot. So I think that there's a mold that they fit in. I'm a doctor, head down, 18 years in the ER, taking care of people. Business guy, head down, raising a family. And, so I prefer to have people focus on what I stand for. Look at my life. Look at how I've lived my life. Look at the principles by which I have stacked up my record, as a family guy, as a business guy, in medicine, what I believe in deeply. I'm conservative, been conservative my whole life and voted Republican my whole life.
Well, of course, we're a nonpartisan organization, so for us, part of Idaho Freedom Foundation stuff, we don't care.
Yeah.
But it does raise an interesting question. You did write a check for $5,000 to AJ Blukoff, and a lot of people would look at that and go, okay, well, does that mean that you support or supported him as a candidate for governor? Again,
when people are used to career politicians coming up through the system, that's probably very unusual. But for a business guy, I have relationships. Many people that are part of your organization probably also have friends that are Democrats.
Do you think AJ Blukoff would have made a good governor?
No, I didn't vote for AJ. I gave money to Governor Otter. I went to hosted our building a fundraiser for Governor Otter and voted for him. So, but I have donations. A majority of my donations have been to Republicans, and I've had a few to Democrats over the years.
So you voted for Otter, but you gave $5,000.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And people will look at that and wonder
I agree, because you want to know why? Because there's the mold that everyone fits in. I get this, that are in the political system as career politicians. It doesn't fit that mold. We've got a president. The funny thing about this is people that love our president, like I do, and what the things he's doing. Look at the way he lived his life up to when he was elected, and the things that you're skewering me for over the last year.
Me, I'm not skewering anybody.
It's our first question, Wayne. We came out with the first question, right?
Yeah, I just want to get out of the way.
Yeah. So those same things. Look at his donation record. He gave to Hillary. I mean, look at what he did in his life. Look at all the things that are there. And would you say he's doing a good job as a conservative back in Washington?
I actually think that Trump is doing a great job.
I think he's doing a fantastic job.
Do you have any issues with what Trump is doing so far?
Nothing. In fact, I love discussing.
Because you were a little bit hesitant at that.
I wasn't hesitant at all. I was Marco Rubio's state co-chair. I thought he would have been a great president. There was the time when some of the things came out early on, but I love what President Trump's doing. I love it. I think that the policies, especially when you look at this tax reform that just went through, who would have thought in my lifetime for my companies and my business, you know what we did immediately? People say, what difference is that going to make in the lives of people? Immediately went back and pushed that down to our employees. Our employees are our most precious resource. That tax reform alone is unbelievable, that in the middle of this mess we have back in Washington, D.C., that is a mess, that we have reform coming out that's actually restoring some of those freedoms in tax policy back to the people. So I love it.
But that's only part. Now, so let's talk about tax policy for a little bit, because we do have legislation running right now that would lower the income tax and would do a few other things. You look at that. Tell me what your vision is for tax policy. Do you agree with the approach that's being taken right now?
So, Wayne, it's been a great 14 months. And as the political outsider, getting my nose under the circus tent and seeing what's going on has been really fun. Do you know how many agencies of state government there are?
Yeah, it's about 90.
So I think there's 68, at least in the budget.
Yeah, okay.
There'll probably be
there's subcategories.
There's a lot. Yeah. When you dig into every agency of state government and how much money they spend, I will promise you they spend our money, they don't invest it. And you look at the way that money comes in and the way government grows, with 68 agencies, we need to stop. We need to look at tax policy. We need complete reform, where we actually, instead of doing what we do right now, where things go through the system, either vetoed or not vetoed or lawsuit, there's no thoughtful data behind it. I think your organization does a great job of actually looking at data of what this means to people in Idaho, right? That's the approach we need. Is what does the data show? What is the spending? What is the true spending of our state government? How is it outpacing our personal income?
Do you agree with that? Because that's
Yes,
a point that we get a little pushback from our current governor. And
because you want to know why? It's funny money to them. It's funny money to them. But all you have to look is what goes in and what comes out, and that growth is far above what we're growing. It is. It just is.
And you took the position that you think that we could find $100 million. Now, initially, people took that to be, and I did too, that you were going to cut $100 million from the budget. Sounds like you've retraced that just a little bit.
No, we're going to. What happens when you get interviewed, and you were in the media for a long time, you'll be on a topic, and they'll take something out of context. We're going to do a couple things. There's way more than $100 million. We're going to save the money and cut it from the budget. Absolutely. The other thing we're going to do is there's enough wasted spending in our state government that we can also pay for needed things like infrastructure and those things. We're going to do both.
So when you look at what it is with that $100 million or the additional could be, what's the top number one item that you want to tackle?
In wasted spending?
Yes.
There's several. So we'll go through.
Well, sure. What's the thing that makes your blood boil?
The thing that makes my blood boil, and I'm sorry to keep bringing this up and having it so misunderstood, but we are not self-insured with our state employees. Little companies, Wayne, people that actually are signing the fronts of paycheck and trying to have a bottom line that works. If you have 90 to 100 employees, you self-insure because you save so much money. Their own study, and then they repeated it because they didn't like what the first results were, show that we would save at least $20 million. And it's at least $20 million a year with that one change. It's the same benefits for the employees, same. In fact, they put more money in their pocket, have the same coverage, and save taxpayers $20 million a year at least. And it's at least when you read the study. That's a big deal. ITD. Right? You look at how we invest money in the transportation department. Why does it cost 2 or 3 times as much when the state does a project as it does me as a private developer? Same road, same specs.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Inefficiencies in process, and it's not their money. They spend our money, they don't invest it. When it's your money, believe me, you hard bid it. You have processes and procedures that make sure that you get it done timely and on budget. Because if you don't survive.
But if you're governor, it's not your money either.
That's exactly right.
So how do you change that?
Well, you treat it as if it is. Is it those tax dollars? Well, maybe that's the problem we have, because the people that you're used to hanging out with are professional politicians that are used to spending other people's money. I've been paying a lot of taxes, Wayne, and I look at those taxes that I spend, and I want them spend like I spend my own money. That's all I'm asking. Can we have the same exact transparency, the same exact excellence that we demand in the real world in government? We have a great state. If you look at the heritage and values that we're built on, the hard work, that can-do spirit in Idaho, we need a government and policy that works as hard as we do. That's all we're asking.
So had you been governor in 2015 and again in 2009, earlier, when the legislature was presented with a tax increase for transportation, your position on that would have been what?
I don't think we need to increase taxes. I don't. I think there's enough money. We have a $3.5 billion budget. I think we need to spend our money more efficiently. And I think that it's going to be a great day when I can get my nose fully under the circus tent and line by line. The lights will be on in that Capitol a lot longer than they are now because we'll stay up all night. But we need to go line by line through the budget and get every dollar we can and put it to where we need it. Because there's no doubt infrastructure is a big problem for ours. But it is built to grow, Wayne. I mean, it is. Look at the spending that comes in June every year. It's built to grow. It's not built to be efficient. And we need to change that paradigm. That's why we need change. That's why I'm for term limits. Anybody that's there too long, you stop paying attention to budgets and you surround yourself with people that start telling you what you want to hear. That would happen to me. It would happen to anyone that's there too long.
You're committing to, if you were to be elected, how many terms?
2, no more than 2.
No more than 2 terms. I want to get back to tax policy though. So if you could wave a magic wand and have your tax policy be the tax policy of the state tomorrow, what would it be? What would the income tax look like? What would sales tax look like? What would property taxes look like?
We have got to get, well, so there's 2 sides of this. You're asking me, so I have to remind people, because when in the business world, you probably do this here with your organization, every Monday morning we have a meeting, and there's 3 parts to the question you just asked. What's the sources of uses? how are we spending our money, okay, and then spending the money.
Okay.
So right now you're asking me one end of it without fully understanding the middle end. So what I'm going to tell you is the first thing that we need to do is say, okay, this metal thing, how are we spending the money and how much excess money do we have? Look at just this year, how much we're going to have in surplus. Look at last year in the unemployment fund, how much money sat there that's not in our economy. So principle number one, before we get to number two, which is you're asking me, is let's make sure we count every dollar, know where it is and how we're spending it, because that will drive tax policy. Now go to the tax policy, income. We've got to get our income tax down. We're not competitive.
What's a good rate?
It's got to be at least 5 or lower, 5 or lower.
5 or lower?
5 or lower.
Because why?
Because we're not competitive. That's what I've done for 12 years, is try to recruit companies into this state. And what do they ask every time? What is your education policy? Do you have enough kids to fill our job? And what's your tax policy? And when we're surrounded by 5 or 0 around us, that one number does not allow businesses
Would
to
you raise a tax to get to 5?
I don't think we need to. Again, I think you look in the middle section, look through these 68 agencies. We don't need to spend $1 more than we need. And those dollars should stay with us. They should stay with us, right? So that's why, that's the biggie for me. I think we've got some funding. You look at property tax, how it just continues to get increased, especially on people with fixed incomes. It's a problem. So I think we need comprehensive reform, which doesn't happen in the state. We don't believe data. We don't look at data. We don't want to believe data. We need a comprehensive tax reform that makes it as flat and as fair as we can and keeps as much of the money in our pockets as we can and invest in our future.
Part of that is the tax reimbursement incentive. Here you have a policy that says we want to bring businesses to the state of Idaho. So we're going to give incentives to certain businesses to do that. So
let's talk a little bit about, because I think that's misunderstood philosophically with me, and my position is probably different than yours. We have skipped over a giant step in Idaho because we're lazy, and that is taking care of current families and businesses. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? Reform tax policy, make it as flat and as fair as you can. And Wayne, here's the one thing that will be different than me and my opponents. We need to keep families and small businesses in mind. As a small business owner, as someone who's paid the taxes, laid up in bed and thought about payroll tax and all the things that need, signed the front of a check, not just the back of a check. Those are the people in Idaho we need to make every decision based on those people. If we do that and take care of small businesses first, not big businesses, believe me, they're well represented in this state. You know that too.
Just a bit.
We need to take care of small businesses first. And if we do that, then down the road, are there ways where you don't pick winners and losers, which I know you hate, but are there policies that are smart to drive some business to new business coming in once you've done this in the right order that doesn't specially select certain people with a committee? Yeah, I think that's great. There's a role for that. And we could spend an hour on this, but there are places where there's some controls that get down to more local decisions that allow you to do some things to incentivize business to come in that I really like once you do it in the right direction.
Are you talking about, because we take the TRI, which you've just described as a policy that the policy of TRI is for big businesses.
Yes.
For businesses that are over a certain number of employees. Doesn't reach the people that have 1 or 2 employees.
Well, it doesn't reach people that have 1 or 2 employees, and it ignores the fact that we haven't spent enough time creating a business environment for current businesses that may do the same thing that the businesses you're going out to get. So acknowledging the flaw in the current scenario, right? We've got to take care of our current businesses.
So are you saying that you would support, it sounds like you don't support TRI, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you don't support TRI, tax reimbursement incentive.
As it currently is, and with how we've skipped over current businesses, no. Why didn't we put as much energy in trying to create tax policy for all businesses?
Does that mean there ought to be tax incentives for little businesses?
Well, I don't know. So here's the thing. Yes, there should be, anything you offer to someone should be offered to everyone, right? And I know you're going to probably get into, urban renewal and some of the other things we have here. When you look at states around us that are really handing it to us in economic development, because what you need in order to have a robust economy and have all the things we need and keep taxes low, you need everybody paying, you need a healthy job growth with the right kind of jobs, which we don't have in Idaho. I mean, we've got people out there telling us, oh, things are all rosy, things are going great. They're not great. Get outside the bubble of the Treasure Valley and see. We still have 1/3 of every Idahoan living in poverty or paycheck to paycheck, right? We do. That's a fact. We lead the country in low minimum wage jobs. So we need good paying jobs to come in. So do I think as governor that as we go down this and we fix it for everyone and then we develop policies that might work and incentivize, I think there's ways to do that once we get the order right.
But I want to be clear. So what you're saying is that the order was done wrong.
Yes.
So
but exclusive, and the way that it just does big business, I think we've talked about this before. I think there's a lot of things wrong with the current way that it happens.
But is it possible though, in your mind, to have a vibrant economic environment where all you do is have a flat, low rate that applies to everybody and no one gets special incentives?
So, yeah, it probably is. But do I think that states around us are doing that, but they are also having local jurisdictions make decisions that bring in $390,000 paying jobs? Yeah, I do. And I think, again, we could talk about examples on this for the entire session here. But I do think that my mind will be open once we take care of businesses and have that same thing you just described to make sure we're being competitive. We want to keep our kids here. You want to keep your kids here. And we want to be as competitive as we can in the region to make Idaho the place that you do business. Strong, grow your business here, and any businesses that want to come in that bring high-paying jobs to Idaho.
Is there a particular state that you think best emulates that policy?
I think the one I've studied most, because we hired the Hoover Institute, so it's a conservative think tank out of Stanford. I'm sure you've read their things. We had them come up and compare us to other states. How are they doing it? How are they tackling infrastructure? How are they tackling education? How are they keeping taxes low at the same time creating an environment for business to thrive? I think Utah's done a really good job on a lot of levels. Not perfect, but you look at a lot of the ways that they've been able to take care of current businesses, tax policy, and drive those. Again, we could probably have long discussions about every single one of those topics. But yeah, there are some good examples.
Why wouldn't we just get rid of the income tax?
We could probably.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Is that something you would support?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you look back at our spending curve, if you just do the math and say, look at our population growth, look at our growth in government, and look at our spending, yeah, there's probably a way we could back up and get rid of income tax altogether if we do it right. Now, we've got a lot of work to do. Again, I'm the outsider. Career politicians I'm going up against, and it's tough. It's tough sledding right now. Let's get in, let's get our nose under the circus tent, and let's look at every single dollar, every agency. The other thing I want to bring up to you is government's a service business. Let me ask you a question. Do you know of any other service industry in the last 10 years that has not improved in innovation with innovation?
It's absolutely incredible.
I look at my businesses. I look at, one of my companies.
Not government, though.
Not government. One of my companies is a tech company. So we do databases. It's an online, it's a service industry. I think about the tremendous advancements in technology that's happened in that one business and how it's streamlined what we do, allowed us to do things way more competitively. Our customer base is now up to 65,000. And we still have the same number of employees, and that's all gone into
because
profit.
Of innovation.
Because of innovation, we need to think more. And I don't hear that talked near enough about is how do we become more efficient to do more with less because of innovation. That doesn't happen in Idaho.
So just to get back to, I want to be clear on this. I recognize that you're in this place where you're appealing to conservatives, but you're also saying that as a tax policy is concerned, you may support economic incentives that benefit certain businesses over other businesses.
No, I think you're putting words in my mouth. I've said the same thing over and over again. I don't think we should pick winners and losers, and policies that we have should be available to everyone. Do I think we need to first tackle full head-on tax policy in Idaho, make it thoughtful and flat and fair for everyone? Yes. Anything that is available should be available to everyone.
Okay, fair enough. But we have a lot of other things to cover, but I know we need to take a break.
And you're the one that's supposed to keep this thing going.
I know, but here I am. I have got to go take a break. So when we come back, more other policy discussions besides just taxes and your political leanings in a minute. Okay, we're back. Let's keep rocking and rolling. I want to know where you are on healthcare policy. First of all, there are a lot of healthcare decisions taking place at the legislature right now. The governor has a plan to add people onto Medicaid and Obamacare subsidies. Your thoughts on that?
Wayne, if there's one thing that will either ruin America as we know it, or we have a chance to save the United States of America in Idaho leading, it is healthcare, period. Let's start asking the right questions. So I'm going to have to walk you through this. If you go back 25 years ago in healthcare and you came to see me and you were one of my patients and you left, what would I charge you back then? I would charge you what it cost. We have had federal policy driven by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. sometimes with good intentions, sometimes with special interest groups' intentions, that have driven pricing of healthcare to where it is completely out of whack with what healthcare should cost to deliver. 25 cents of every dollar actually hits healthcare that's paid into the system. And 75 cents of that dollar gets eaten up by the monster in the middle that has an appetite that will never be satiated, ever. You can keep throwing money at it all you want. In fact, the thing that ought to just disgust us in the United States of America, our country, with our freedoms and our ability to be innovative and transparent and have free markets, now you're hearing people say, well, let's take Medicaid and stretch it to everyone, because it's the only solution that's out there.
So I take it that that's not your approach. So what is your
so listen, Medicaid should be there for the people that need it most. And we're threatening the very bottom of the safety net by saying, let's make Medicaid. And I realize that people are frustrated and they don't have anywhere else to go but say, well, this is the easy solution. That's rearranging the lawn chairs on the Titanic.
Okay, so
here's what we do. First of all, we had to get to the point of we have a mess. And the mess is because of the federal government. And anything that says, let's do more of that will not work. The closer the giver is to the receiver, the better. We need to make state decisions and get as much down as we can. One more philosophical thing, then I'll get into my solutions. 25 years ago, we were a primary care centric delivery system of healthcare in America. Okay. We are hospital centric now. We're hospital centric with fee schedules that don't make sense. So number one, we reform Medicaid. Okay. What does that even mean? We have to put personal accountability in Medicaid. And you can do it at the state level, where you actually have incentives as a Medicaid patient to not frivolously spend money. If you spent one night with me in the ER, your head would spin around and you'd probably just go, you're going to be kidding me. This can't happen in America. Number two, we have to manage Medicaid spending. Why is that important? Because Medicaid reimbursements to facilities drives the cost or pricing of care up. So you manage those dollars and limit that amounts that are paid, right? If you don't do that, that's what sets pricing for everything else. So we've got to reform Medicaid. Number two, we do need insurance reform, right? We do need. In fact, it's funny that we've been talking about pushing back on these federal mandates from Obamacare on insurance reform for a year. But the way they just went about it, midstream, mid-cycle, backroom deal, we can't do that either.
What are you talking about? The executive order? You don't like the executive order?
I just think the way the executive order, they've said it publicly. It was a political move, right? It was a political move. But do I think we need to roll it back? Do I think we need to work with the insurance industry to get flexibility out there? Absolutely.
Would you have created a state insurance exchange?
Never. That's what's so ironic about this is here you support the exchange and then you do what just happened, right? Get rid of the exchange first then, because that's what we need to do is let's get rid of the exchange.
You would get rid of the exchange. Yeah. So if you were governor, you'd sign a bill, get rid of the insurance exchange. Yeah. Okay. Would you also, the
insurance exchange is going to fail, Wayne.
Well,
it's crumbling. No, we're not talking about it, and certainly they're not talking about it, but it is failing right now. And now because it never worked, right? It wasn't going to work. And so you hear people say how great it's been. The insurance exchange is going to fail anyway. So let's get back to this. So you've got to have insurance reform to allow flexibility back down to the patients, right? And within that insurance reform, we have got to get back to this notion that you take money, put it in an account, you have personal accountability with it. You can port that with you where you go from your employer and help make decisions for your own. That's got to be critically important in Idaho, and we need to lead the nation on that.
So why do you suppose that hasn't happened?
I think it's lack of ideas. I think it's lack of boldness. I think it's giant industries that are at play here. I mean, let's not be naive here. There are giant companies and industries that we're talking about that influence these decisions.
So would you allow a person to be able to buy an insurance plan in another state if they wanted to?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you allow a person to be able to buy an insurance plan that contained no provisions for primary health coverage or wellness checks and things like that?
We need as much flexibility in the system.
So you would let somebody go do that?
Well, look at the MedShare program.
That's very different from what I hear a lot of doctors say.
But listen to the MedShare program. You've got it.
You talk about the Christian ministry.
The Christian ministry thing. I mean, they went in and got a little teeny, they said, hey, give us a little exemption because we're Christians and we're going to do it differently. They now manage $1 billion. Because why? Personal accountability. Control of where they're putting their dollars, transparency. Okay, I got to keep going. High risk pool. Okay, so in Idaho, if you look at the curve of who consumes most of the healthcare dollars, it's 10% of the people that consume 90% of the healthcare, right? So think about that. Why wouldn't we then help those people have primary care? Back to this primary care delivery system to keep them out of being sick, right? Help them voluntarily. Do you have your meds? Do you have a doctor? Do you have the care you need? Because you're the ones consuming all the dollars. So that you stay
So
healthy.
you're saying the government has a role in asking that question?
No. Well, government already does. Do you know what the high risk pool is right now? Do you know how that works?
Yeah, I do. But
So right now we identify those people, and the state government through the high risk pool pays $200,000 worth of their care.
250, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's 50 from the insurance company, then 200 from the state insurance fund. So over 250, then it goes back to the insurance company. So you're already involved in their care.
Right.
You're just paying their bills.
Would you get rid of the county indigent program too?
Different question.
Okay.
Let me talk about the indigent program.
Correct.
Everyone in Idaho ought to go tour our community health clinics around Idaho. Statewide footprint, excellent care, fantastic care at a fraction of the cost. There are so many out-of-the-box ways that we can deliver care at cost to people who need it most, instead of having these people go to the most expensive alternative and then have taxpayers pay for it. These are the kind of things we need to start talking about. It doesn't make sense the way the current thing goes.
We talked about penalization of misuse of emergency rooms, things like that. Or co-payments for folks that don't have skin in the game currently.
Well, I think co-payments are good. I think those, but also just education. Here's where you can go for healthcare and get it at cost. There are people. Let me get to my last point. We absolutely need transparency in medicine. If you think of the one thing that's the worst part of what's happened in these decades of drift that I call, we've lost transparency. You can go in this valley from one facility and pay 8 times, 9 times what you pay at the right next facility. Do you think the industries know the difference in costs? Absolutely. I promise in my first year, we will all have an app on our phones. You'll click on it. It's going to be Transparent Healthcare Idaho, voluntary program, where you'll put in your zip code and say what you need done and have what the base price is.
How would you enforce that?
I won't enforce it. So
you're going to have a program.
Can you imagine? Wait till a healthcare organization doesn't want to participate in a transparent or
so you.
What do you think they'll do?
Well, I'm wondering why you feel the government has to create.
It's not the government. Well, because who else is going to provide the transparency to people? Government's already so in healthcare, Wayne, that we're drowning in government and healthcare. All I'm saying is let's provide data to people.
But you just created another program to provide that.
I have, and it's going to be transparency in that is not reaching our people in any other way. Can you imagine if you knew today, if your kid needed care and it was 8 times as much as one facility as another, that wouldn't drive your decision as a responsible
Oh, it
person?
Absolutely would. I'm just questioning the notion that government is the only one that can create that.
Well, who's going to do it? You want to do it here at IFF?
Well, stay tuned. I'll give you a policy solution that involves no government creation whatsoever to get transparency.
I'm not sorry about talking. To be really clear, you know this data exists.
Yes, it does. It most definitely does. But
you know that the automation for this. Listen, I'm a guy that does databases. The amount of cost that it's going to cost us to have this one thing is almost nothing to just publish information to people. This is not rocket science, so don't make it sound like we're doing another department. And then the last thing I need is, Ahlquist is going to create another department. This is data that already exists, that's already in the industry, that doesn't make.
So you would basically, it would be a carrot approach. Is you go ahead, put your information on here, or be embarrassed by the fact that you're not being.
That's exactly
so
right.
As governor, you would go around telling people, hey, whatever hospital was not willing to provide their information is what you're.
Yeah. What
I think. Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but. Running out of time. So tell me, let's talk about education, because education is a really big issue. K-12 higher education, all that kind of stuff is obviously the biggest part of the state budget. If you can wave a magic wand, do one thing for education system in Idaho, what would it be?
Fix it from the top.
Which means what?
Accountability. The way the state board interacts with the Department of Education needs to be fixed. Everything else comes underneath that.
Well, the governor proposed a CEO to.
That's the. Why would you? Because we don't have enough government already, Wayne. I mean, because 200.
I'm not advocating the position.
Because 220 employees in the Department of we don't have enough already. It's accountability.
Do you think it's just a communication thing, or
it's just broken? Fundamentally, the way we set policy and goals and accountability in Idaho is not working. The good news for us is I tell everyone this. When I went into this. You hear a lot of things about what's wrong with education. Wayne, I've been around this state. Last year, going into schools, talking to parents, teachers, superintendents around the state, looking at test scores of all these facilities, we have a problem. Let's believe the data and let's leap forward 20 years and get a modern education for our kids here in Idaho. And it's leadership, it's not money. 63% of every dollar goes towards education. 63%.
So obviously money always comes up, and things like, would you lower the supermajority to help build schools? Is that a thing that you would support?
No, I wouldn't, because I think what we need to do is look at the funding formulas. I do think we need to do that, and that's going on right now. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know why it takes years.
About a generation of kids, I think, is how long it takes.
Let's look at our.
Well, it hasn't been done since the middle 90s.
I know. So I know that they've got good people looking at that right now, but let's get that data. Let's look how we're funding things. Let's look at all the same principle. Let's look through everything we're funding, but let's get clear. Let's get clarity around what the goals even are. If I asked you, what does student achievement mean in Idaho, you'd give me a different answer than the next guy. Everyone's on a different page on K-12 education.
They are, but I mean, there are some things that are pretty common in the vernacular of education. Would you support money following the students? So instead of having one kid that costs $10,000 and another kid that costs $5,000, and a complex system to figure out where that money goes, would you support the money just following the kids?
I love choice. I love the option, giving option to parents. And you can't argue. You go around the state, any place, any pod that has some choice, where parents are able to go different places for the education of the kids and let money fall, they're doing well. Rural Idaho is an issue, but I'll tell you, look at Salmon, Idaho, public charter school and a regular school in a little teeny community, that's working.
And you're okay with that?
Oh yeah.
Would you expand on it?
I think we need to expand on charter schools. I think right now we do just like everything else we do. There's so much mediocrity in the way that we actually roll these things out that they're almost doomed from failure with taxpayer dollars from the beginning. So if we're going to have charter schools, let's have a process that's excellent. Let's have best practices, and let's set these things up to succeed and let that competition help. So yeah, absolutely. I think that would help. But there's a lot of room. I mean, you meet with all these folks and how that this works right now. It doesn't work well. It's not how you would do it in the real world because it's your own money. Problem is, when it's not your money, they act differently.
Would you start kids in school earlier?
So I know where you're going with this is pre-K. After digging into this, we have such a problem, even managing K-12 in Idaho. Let's focus there.
Did you support K-12 pre-K at one time?
So listen, if anyone will, I'll ask you, do you think coming into kindergarten, having learned some things before you come in is not good for you?
Oh, it absolutely is. The question is who should do it?
The question is who should pay for it. So what I do support is what we did in Caldwell through the United Way. There's pre-K in every school in Caldwell right now without the government running all that. It was through the United Way. They followed a model called Promise Neighborhoods. I think there's a lot of ways to
I think they did it in the building.
They did it
They did use the school building.
Well, because you've got bricks and mortars that's sitting there, right, in each community. That's a lot of the programs United Way does. It's really interesting. When you've got a used building that's sitting there without uses, they will use that brick and mortar as a gathering place. So yeah, that's true. But the entire program was driven by the community. It didn't have any other state funding other than the buildings that are already there sitting there. So things like that make sense to me.
Let's talk about higher ed, college, university system. What would you do?
Oh my word.
Would you start a task force to study the problem?
I will never have a task force. Scout's honor, I will never have a task force. And that doesn't mean we won't study things. Here's the problem with the task force. It's passing the buck. It's kicking the can down the road. I want to be sitting at the table. Let's bring in experts. Let's get after the things that matter most. Let's run this state like we really care and have some urgency about fixing things. Okay? So here's the two things that I want to see in higher education. If you look at every kid in Idaho, right now there's a complete disconnect between a kid in Idaho and a job in Idaho. What do those jobs look like? First of all, there are technical jobs, good paying jobs where we are not creating line of sight between our kids and those jobs. And there are great examples we could talk about forever around the state where you do have technical education early on for these kids where they're kicked out right into a job. That is a model that works, and we need to absolutely expand and scale that to where kids have that option. Over here for higher ed, let's just start over. If you think about what we do right now, we have kids, dual credits, $4,000 per student. 50% of those don't even transfer to our public universities. No common numbering system. So go take English 101 here, retake it over here. We don't think about these 2 and 4 year degrees about what's the job on the other end. We've got enrollments that are decreasing and spending that's going through the roof. The way this changes is, can you imagine if we had funding formulas for higher ed that incentivized connecting these kids as quickly as possible to jobs in Idaho. It would completely change the way things happen.
It's fascinating to me because we watched now, I think if my son's considering going to Boise State, he has a 30% chance of actually graduating with a degree at Boise State. And that's considered good, by the way.
That's actually high for what I would say.
That's high, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And part of that is the singular focus on getting kids into college, that 60% by 20. Do you support that?
I think the messaging on this is horrible. What we need for our kids in Idaho is to say, here's your pathways, and use that word pathway, because it's a pathway to the future. One of the greatest things about America is that we have freedoms and free markets and the ability to become and do anything you want to do. Let's show that to our youth and then show them the pathways that allow them to succeed. But by saying 60, what's in the minds? I'll tell you, I don't know. I know what they're trying to say, but the minds everywhere out in Idaho is we're failing.
Is that a money problem, or we're just not putting enough money into college and universities?
No, it's not a money problem at all.
What is
it's
the
leadership? It's leadership. So the idea of a CEO higher ed, I think if you look at the idea, creating a whole nother, I'm not for that, but some of the ideas, some of the redundancy that exists on each campus, absolutely. But let's have some accountability at the governor's office. Let's hold me accountable for how we spend our money on higher ed, and hold me accountable for the results out the back end, because that's ultimately where the buck should stop, not with another bureaucracy.
We're almost out of time, so I want to wrap this up with a fun topic that I just love talking about, and that's occupational licenses.
Yeah.
You have a lot of occupations in the state that are governed by the state of Idaho that you can't get into unless you've received some kind of training by that's validated by the state and some occupational licensure board. Is that an issue that you're concerned about, interested in, want to do something with?
Yeah, again, I will make every decision as governor about what's best for families and small businesses of Idaho. And there's examples.
Well, some people will argue that having a license for a plumber or for a veterinarian or for somebody who's going to put curling irons in somebody's hair requires.
So you've got, and you just went through a whole range of people, right? So here's my philosophy: listen to the people in the trenches in that industry.
But the people in the trenches in that industry are the ones that are
not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you think about the industries, you listen to them and you be very careful. We do not need another regulation in this country or this state, Wayne. We don't. And if you think you do, go open a business, whatever the business is. I just spent the other day with a bunch of assisted livings, which we started some assisted livings. Just spend some time investing your own money and time trying to get something up off the ground with the amount of regulation and licensing and bureaucracy and bull you have to put up with. Do that a few times and then come back and tell me we need more.
So is that a pledge? Then you would never sign a bill to create another occupational license?
You love this stuff. I'm not going to comment on a bill that I haven't seen. Come on. But what I will tell you is we do not need any barriers to allowing businesses and people to succeed. And there are so many, Wayne. There's so many everywhere you go. So let's stop it. Let's help our people. Let's let the economy grow.
Okay. Any other closing thoughts before we...
No, thanks. I was hoping to get to a lot more with you today.
There's only so much time, but we'll continue the dialogue, and I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.